Welcome to this presentation about immersive virtual reality in geotourism. Firstly, I want to thank the conveners for this session, in particular Angus Robinson, for the opportunity to speak as a keynote. Now, while it's me that's going to be taking you through some highlights today of our work in Project Live, as I'll introduce in a second, there are a whole range of other people as part of the Project Live team who have been significant contributors to everything I'm going to show. So I really do want to acknowledge all of their efforts in many of the examples you're going to see today. Now, I'm presenting to you today from our Project Live studios. And I did that deliberately, I guess, to give you a sense of where we see in the education sector the future of learning experiences, and perhaps in the geotourism sector as well, where the future of those tourism experiences might lie as well, as we'll explore today. So, just to give you a bit of a summary of today's presentation, I'll start with an introduction about Project Live. What is it? What are we doing here at the University of South Australia that links in with a lot of the initiatives in geotourism that we'll explore today? I'll largely do that by demonstrating one of our key flagship products, virtual experiences. Beyond the Ice is our experience for Helich Cove. I'll be demonstrating that today, showing how what we've created is very adaptable, very relevant to many of the opportunities that present themselves in the geotourism sphere. So that will really be the emphasis of what we'll go through today. Once you've seen it and you've got a bit of an idea about what that VR experience is all about, I'll deconstruct it. What are the elements that make it up? How did we collect all of the different aspects, all of the different assets that make up an effective geotourism experience, to give you a sense of how it was built. As I do that, of course, some benefits of the approach that we've used will emerge, and also some challenges, some of the really difficult parts of doing that and scaling it to produce many different geotourism experiences. So I'll start to delve into that aspect of translating what we've done into the geotourism sphere as well. And then finally, I'll end with a bit of a conclusion about where to next. What else have we done? What are the opportunities on the horizon? Where do we see much of the work that we're doing in Project Live heading in the near future? Okay, so let's start with Project Live. What is it? Well, Live, as you can see there, stands for Learning Through Immersive Virtual Environments. It's a cross-disciplinary initiative at the University of South Australia, started in earth science, but is now broadened to a whole range of other parts in STEM at the university. So everything from engineering to construction and project management to environmental science, even in finance and business, many different parts of the university and the programs that we teach. You'd be amazed at the different places where virtual experiences are a really great way to communicate the messages we're trying to get across in terms of our learning experiences. So Project Live has been a very holistic experience and platform, I guess, at the university to embed virtual reality and mixed reality experiences across a range of different teaching programs. As I said, it started in earth science and it's been going for about 6 years now. In fact, 7 years, starting in 2014. Now, if you go to our website, you'll see on the projects page the diversity of many of the things that I've just mentioned. So everything from some of our primary earth science geotours, like the Beyond the Ice one that we'll unpack in a bit, and also some interactive experiences in other parts of geoscience, such as the Rock Explorer VR experience, which is linked to the MinX CRC. You'll also find some of the other ones that I mentioned. One of the key ones, just to give you a sense of where else in other disciplines this is headed, is the Facing Fire experience, which is designed as a way to simulate a bushfire evacuation scenario, something that's, of course, very relevant in our current climate, giving people an idea about just the stresses and difficulties that they would face evacuating from their own home and simulating that experience in VR. So if you head to our website, you'll get a very clear indication of all the different diversity of projects that we've put together. So what I'll do now is focus on a demonstration of our flagship virtual tour, which is Beyond the Ice, the Helich Cove VR Geo Challenge. Now, the obvious question to ask, of course, is why did we pick Helich Cove? Now, if you've ever studied geology in South Australia in any form, you'll know exactly the answer to that question, because it is a mecca for anyone who's done that. Helich Cove is, of course, a geological heritage site, and one that's known really well internationally, perhaps even better than it is known in our own backyard. And there are some very good reasons for that. It combines a huge amount of information across around 600 million years of changes to the Earth system. So everything from the rise of the Mount Lofty Ranges and the deformation that's associated with that, some beautiful folds that you can see at Black Cliff, for example, all the way through to glaciation in the Permian and the very famous glacial striations that were found by Professor Ralph Tate. And then leading, of course, into the modern day sedimentary environments that shape the landscape now. All the way through, as I said, 600 million years of Earth's history that's beautifully preserved and very accessible to students that want to visit. And of course, the reason that we take our students there are exactly the same reasons that members of the general public want to go there for a geotourism experience. Now, the way that those geotourism experiences have been communicated in the past is, of course, via the Geological Society of Australia field brochures, many of which were authored by people here at the University of South Australia, primarily Barry Cooper. Our approach really was to take those traditional brochures and convert them into an interactive VR experience. They contain a wealth of really great interpretive information that was very easily adaptable into quite a diverse and quite an interactive virtual reality experience. So that was a great lead up for us. Now, rather than me talking any further and trying to verbally summarise what the VR experience is all about, what I've prepared is a bit of a video summary to give you a much better impression about exactly what the VR experience is all about. So sit back, relax for a couple of minutes as we show you what the Geo Challenge is all about. Now that you've got a bit of an impression about what makes up the Helich VR experience, I'll unpack some of the different elements that you saw and how they operate in that VR environment. The first thing you might have seen, of course, is VT, our interactive robot guide, with a memory, as it says there, spanning 600 million years. That's his cute little face that you can see there, and you would have seen him floating through many of those clips that you just saw, guiding the user to different parts of the scene, giving them a hand, launching various different tasks, and being your kind of pocket assistant, if you like, as you go through. Now, some of the tasks that were performed that you might not have picked up, and I'll just take you through each of those in turn. The first one was that there's an interactive hand lens that the user can pick up and use to identify fossils. They can also measure glacial striations using a compass which sits on their wrist. They can draw the outlines of folds and layers in the sedimentary rocks using digital ink that appears as annotations on the scene and really reveals much of the structure of the images. They can take part in some quizzes that test their knowledge and inform them about different parts of the landscape. They can collect 3D pet rocks, as we call them, which are scans of some of the key lithologies that they see as they go through the Helich Conservation Park. And finally, they also have access to an interactive lab environment where they can return to at any time during the VR experiences and is really the launch pad for many of the different elements that make up the tour. They will reveal a geological history of Helich Cove that's unlocked as they progress through the various different sites. There are some hidden Easter eggs that they can also unlock as they learn different things throughout the experience. It's also where their pet rocks are collected, for example, and where they can launch fly-throughs to various different scenes within Helich Cove itself, and even undertake a bit of a drone tour of the whole conservation park. So how did we assemble all of the different components that make up the Helich Cove VR experience? What I'll do now is deconstruct that for you, give you a bit of a behind-the-scenes look at how everything came together to create this experience. But before I do that, I guess one of the questions that I'm often asked is, how accessible is VR technology? Why would you bother picking that platform to deliver your experience? And I guess that's equally relevant to geotourism opportunities as well. Why would you put all your eggs in the VR basket if it's a step too far for most people? And I guess this slide really summarises how approachable VR is now. We've gone, as I said, Project Live started around 7 years ago. We've gone from headsets and interfaces that were very rudimentary and cost thousands of dollars to operate, to the scenario that we see now, where we have off-the-shelf VR headsets, which are fantastic in terms of their quality, very easy to wear, very usable across generations, basically, everyone from a small child all the way up to an elderly person. They're equally useful across all different age brackets, and very affordable, as you can see there. So all of our headsets, for example, that we use in our VR lab here at UniSA, are the Oculus Rift S, which is a headset you can get for less than $700 and is used in conjunction with a laptop. Or an even more attractive proposition that we have now, of course, is the Oculus Quest 2. You can see there, less than $500 and doesn't require a laptop to be able to work. So a really affordable way to get into VR. Okay, so moving along to the various different components, assets if you like, that are used to build the Helich Cove experience. So you'll see a bunch of different technologies in that list there that we use to create some visual aspect of the Helich Cove experience. Let me just unpack those a bit for you now. So the first and second one really do go hand in hand. Drone surveying. So aerial imagery is a fantastic way to access a landscape in a new way. And the drones really do give us that perspective, whether it's some aerial footage, for example, and we can hang 360 cameras like the example you can see in the image there to create a very immersive bird's eye view moving across the landscape, something that you cannot get on the ground, for example. And it's also fantastic to create some very large-scale photogrammetry models, so 3D models that is. So in the case of the Helich Cove Conservation Park, for example, we were able to map the entire park using a drone, so we have an interactive 3D model of everything that any visitor would see when they went to that site. And that also works just as well, if not better, at the small scale, so individual examples of 3D models at Black Cliff, for example, or the Sugarloaf, and everything in between. We also use photogrammetry to collect many of the individual hand samples, so the 3D models that became the pet rock collection that the users would assemble as they went through the experience. That was all done via photogrammetry. One of the other components that makes up the virtual tour is deep zoom photography, or gigapixel photography as it's often called. That's an image that looks like a single shot, but in fact is made up of hundreds and in some cases thousands of images which have been stitched together. Now that gives the user the ability to go from a very broad view of a scene, for example, looking at Helich Cove Conservation Park as a whole, or a particular part of the cliff section, for example, and then being able to zoom right in to very minute details in the cliff face or in the far distance in the amphitheatre, for example. So it's a great way to combine different scales from the very broad scale up to the very fine scale. A great way to see the landscape from those two perspectives all at once. Terrestrial laser scanning was another technology that we dabbled in a little bit, and you might see in some of the other tours that we've assembled later on in this presentation. I won't go too much more into that. The other one is 360-degree photos and videos. These are fantastic ways to immerse yourself in the tour and really feel like you're there. So rather than just showing the user a shot at each of the key sites as they navigate around, rather they're placed in the scene as though they're there. They can manipulate their head movement to look at whatever they would prefer to look at. And of course that works well with still images, but it works really, really well with moving images as well. So you can feel like you're walking along the boardwalk, for example. You can feel like you're sitting within a drone, hovering over Helich Cove and moving across the conservation park to see it from all angles, things that you just cannot do as part of your regular visitor experience outside of VR. The other thing that we built into it, which I'll show a little bit more later on, is using your mobile phone. And that provides supplementary information if you were to visit the site itself, so that you can be fed information about a site you're looking at using geo-tracking to alert you when you're at a site of interest, and giving you a pocket companion, if you like, to guide you through the site and reveal things that you might not have noticed if you were just wandering around or looking for the traditional signage that's in place. So I'll show you a little bit more about that later on. The key thing as we went through this, I guess, though, is we recognise that in any experience, this applies in learning experiences, it applies certainly in tourism experiences as well, is that one size does not fit all. I alluded to this a little bit earlier on when I talked about the accessibility of VR. Whilst I would argue it is quite accessible, we recognise that not everyone has a headset. That's just a simple fact. The technology is getting quite mature. A lot more people are getting access to it, but still there are a large number of people that have never experienced VR before and don't have the means to do that. We didn't want to prevent them from having a go at the Beyond the Ice experience, so we wanted to create a number of different ways that they could do that with some more basic technology that everyone has access to. And the way we did that, as you can see there, is a few different platforms. The first one being a web-based geotour. So we took all of the different elements, all the different assets that we'd acquired to produce the VR experience and translated into one that runs in any regular web browser. So you can access it on a laptop or a desktop PC that you might have. You can access it on a tablet. You can do it on your phone. Whatever device that you might have that has a regular web browser will give you the opportunity to experience quite an interactive web-based tour. And it's not just images, it contains all the videos, it contains all the voiceovers, it contains a whole range of different interactive and engaging components that are borrowed straight from the VR experience. So it is quite an authentic replica of what you see there. The other thing is to take it into the mobile sphere as well, as I alluded to before, mobile learning games. So if you were inspired, for example, to go to Helich Cove itself, you could experience a bit more information being fed to you via a mobile app. So if you look on our website at the Beyond the Ice webpage, you'll find links to the iOS and the Android app stores where you can download these apps and take it along with you to be given a whole range of different information when you're there at site. So another alternative platform for people to access some of this information. And the final one that I've got there is Street View Trails. If you want a bit of a different experience, I guess that lends itself probably to trail walking, for example. You don't necessarily need all of the different interpretive information so much. You just want to get a feel for what the natural environment is like and plan your way through it. We collected every single walking trail that exists in Helich Cove. We collected immersive 360 images every 5 metres to create a virtual street view, if you like, that you can navigate at your own pace. So you can just press play and almost do a virtual walking tour through the entire conservation park. You can pause it wherever you like. You can change your orientation to look at whatever you would prefer to look at. So another way to access that entire landscape at your own pace and focusing on what you would like to focus on. Now, the thing that I would say about many of these platforms as well is they aren't just static. They don't just work on the screen as well. So the web-based tours, for example, they work with a VR plugin as well. So if you did have even a basic VR capability, such as using a Google Cardboard, where you place your phone into a cardboard headset that you just place over your eyes, you can get a VR experience using that as well. So you don't need a dedicated headset necessarily, or if you do, you can equally use the web browser to access it, as opposed to the standalone geo-challenge that we produced. So we try to be as diverse as possible in order to cover all the different avenues that people might be accessing the virtual tour from. I think this diverse and multi-platform approach is critically important from the point of view of access and inclusion. And I think there's something really to be said about what VR offers as opposed to the on-site geotourism experiences alone, because it does create completely new audiences and completely new opportunities. Just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about there, we launched the Helich Cove VR experience during National Science Week in August. within the first month of it being online, with no promotion at all other than a few social media posts, for example, it had been accessed by 35 countries across the globe. Okay, so audiences that just would never have seen it other than creating a VR experience. People that, not only because they were in COVID lockdown, of course, but just because they may not have had the opportunity yet or were likely to ever get the opportunity to come to Australia, they can get a very authentic and engaging experience to visit Helich Cove and see what the fantastic geology there is all about. So that's one way in which you can open you to totally new global audiences, which I think is critically important. From an access and inclusion point of view though, we see this with our students. Some students just cannot go into the field for access issues, or maybe they're even just sick on the day. That equally applies to geotourism opportunities. Some people just cannot physically get to particular sites due to their remoteness or how rugged the terrain is. We see VR as a critical way to create something that is very, very close to the experience that they would get had they had the opportunity to visit it on site. And not only that, I would argue, in fact, it gives you something that you can't even get when you're on site. So the ability, for example, to fly through the air in a drone and see the landscape from that point of view. Everyone who's ever been to a spectacular environment to see geology has thought, I wish there was a helicopter ride here, or I guess alternatively, I wish I could afford the helicopter rides that are available here. I guess with VR, we've got that base covered. You can have your own VR helicopter experience, if you like, flying through the landscape, seeing it from angles that you just can't get on the ground. So that's another way in which it really does open new opportunities as opposed to the traditional geotourism platforms that we use today. So yeah, access and inclusion are critical aspects of the VR experience that we really do emphasise a lot for our own students and are equally applicable to the general public as they make decisions about which geotourism opportunities are right for them. Now that you've got a bit of a sense of the work we're doing in the VR space at Project Live and how that translates to geotourism, I guess that begs the question of where to next. What do we see as being the next opportunities on the horizon for us? Now, I've preempted that a little bit, I suppose, because we do have a few VR experiences in earth science and geotourism that I'll mention briefly now. The first of those is for the Newer Volcanics province, where there's a virtual tour we've created for Mount Schank and Mount Gambier. We also have some existing tours for Witchelina that Pat James, who's also presenting as part of this session, may be talking about. So that's in the Woolowan Ranges. We have ones for the Ediacaran and Cambrian fossil galleries at the SA Museum. And we also have a work in progress for the Flinders Ranges that we're hoping will be developed in support of the World Heritage nomination. All of these tours cover a range of different settings, from urban to regional. We also, the other one I should mention, of course, as well, is the North Terrace Building Stones tour. Classic example of an urban geotourism experience that's very, very accessible, right in the centre of Adelaide. Very popular tour that's been run, of course, at the AESC in many years past, where Barry Cooper's run that experience. You can now do it in VR. So we're trying to create a whole range of different flavours, I suppose, of geotourism experiences to demonstrate the possibilities there. And we certainly see it being adaptable to basically any style of landscape, any style of place that you want to create a very interactive, a very authentic, a very engaging geotourism experience. So I'd be very happy to hear about suggestions or opportunities you see as being amenable to the kind of approaches that we've used here. And of course, I will emphasise again, everything that I've shown you today is accessible via our Project Live webpage. So I would encourage you, if there's anything you've seen, head there, check it out. You'll get a very good sense of the kinds of things we've created, and they're all freely accessible. So please do spend some time exploring them and let us know what you think. So that's all from me today. Thanks so much for listening and for downloading this presentation to access as part of the virtual AESC this year. I look forward to the Q&A which follows and hearing all about your insights and questions that you may have about what was presented today. I'll see you then.